A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
You ever get that feeling where you are talking to someone, and they are nodding along, looking you right in the eye, saying all the right things, but you just know they have no idea what you're actually saying? They're just really good at reading the room?
I have been on the receiving end of that look from you more than a few times, Corn. I am Herman Poppleberry, by the way.
Well, you do have a tendency to go into the weeds on things like kernel-level optimizations at dinner. But today, we're looking at a different kind of faking it. Today's prompt from Daniel is about a significant systematic experiment involving Google's Gemini 1.5 Flash Lite model and how it handles audio.
This is a timely one because we are right in the middle of this massive push toward the Flash era of AI. Just this month, on March 3rd, 2026, Google dropped Gemini 3.1 Flash Lite, and then today, March 26th, we saw the Flash Live preview. The whole industry is focused on speed and low latency audio-to-audio interaction.
Right. The goal is an assistant that talks back instantly, no lag. But Daniel sent us the results of this study that asks a specific question. Is your AI assistant a brilliant audio engineer or just a really talented lip reader who happens to be deaf?
That frames the issue perfectly. The experiment used a single 21-minute unscripted audio recording and tested it with 49 different analytical prompts across 13 categories. We are talking about everything from speaker profiling and health inference to forensic audio and environment classification.
21 minutes of unscripted audio is a lot of data. Most people just throw a 30-second clip at a model and call it a day. But this study really went under the hood to see if these models are actually hearing the sound, or if they're just performing a very sophisticated version of natural language processing on the transcript.
And the results point to what researchers are calling the signal versus symbol gap. It turns out Gemini is a world-class linguist but a poor physicist.
So, it knows what I am saying, but it does not know how I am saying it.
It is even more unusual than that. It can tell you have a southern United States accent or guess your age with decent accuracy, but it is not doing it by analyzing the vibration of your vocal cords or the resonance of your chest cavity. It is doing it by listening to the words you choose and the stories you tell.
It is essentially using contextual clues rather than actual acoustic data.
In a way, yes. The model shows a massive semantic bias. If the speaker in the audio mentions they are tired or feeling old, the model will confidently report that the vocal signal shows signs of aging or fatigue. But if you take those same words and have a 20-year-old read them with perfect energy, the model often still flags them as elderly because it prioritizes the symbol, the word, over the signal, the actual sound wave.
This brings us to the whole issue of how these things actually process audio. Because we keep hearing the term native multimodality, people think that means the AI is looking at a waveform like an audio editor does. But that is not what is happening, is it?
Not at all. And this is where we have to talk about tokenization. When Gemini processes audio, it does not see a continuous wave. It breaks that audio down into discrete chunks, or tokens.
So, it is processing the audio as discrete units.
Precisely. These tokens are compressed representations. The problem is that in the process of turning a raw audio signal into a token that a large language model can understand, you lose a lot of the physical data. You lose the fine-grained spectral information and the precise timing.
So the model is analyzing the representation of the sound rather than the raw performance.
It is looking at a representation of the sound that has already been filtered through a linguistic lens. This is why the experiment found that Gemini failed at quantitative tasks. For example, when asked to calculate words per minute, the model was consistently off. It could not accurately measure the passage of time relative to the number of words spoken because it does not have an internal clock that is synced to the audio signal in that way.
That seems like a pretty basic thing for an AI to get wrong. If I ask a human to tell me if someone is talking fast, they just know.
But even a human can be fooled by density of information. The model, however, is doing something even more abstract. It is guessing based on the density of the tokens it receives. If it sees a lot of tokens in a short window, it assumes the person is talking fast. But because those tokens are compressed and often represent semantic meaning rather than just raw sound, the correlation breaks down.
What about the emotion detection? Because that is a huge selling point for these new models. They say they can detect your mood.
This was one of the most revealing parts of the study. The researchers asked Gemini to map the speaker's emotions onto a valence arousal scale. Valence is how positive or negative an emotion is, and arousal is how intense it is.
I am a sloth, Herman. My arousal level is permanently set to low. My valence is generally pleasant, unless I am out of hibiscus flowers.
And the model would probably get that right because you would be talking about hibiscus flowers. In the experiment, Gemini provided very plausible sounding reports. It would say things like, the speaker's valence is a 0.6 out of 1, indicating a generally positive outlook. But when the researchers looked closer, they realized the model was just summarizing the content of the speech. If the speaker said, I am having a great day, the model gave it a high valence. If the speaker used a sarcastic tone but kept the positive words, the model often missed the sarcasm and stuck with the positive rating.
So it interprets the literal meaning of the words without accounting for tone.
It lacks acoustic grounding. It does not have a dedicated digital signal processing, or DSP, layer. Most traditional audio analysis tools use DSP to look at things like pitch jitter, shimmer, or the fundamental frequency. Gemini is trying to do all of that through the same mechanism it uses to predict the next word in a sentence. It is using a general-purpose linguistic tool for a specialized physical task.
And that is where the hallucination of expertise comes in. This part of Daniel's prompt really stuck out to me. The idea that the model generates these professional-sounding technical reports for things it cannot actually see.
It is quite concerning. In the audio engineering category of the experiment, they asked the model for equalization recommendations and compression settings for the recording. The model came back with very specific advice. It said things like, I recommend a 3 decibel boost at 2 kHz to improve clarity and a fast attack on the compressor to catch the transients.
That sounds like something you would say, Herman. It sounds very smart.
It sounds incredibly smart. But here's the catch. When the researchers analyzed the actual audio signal, those recommendations made no sense. The audio was already very bright. A 3 decibel boost at 2 kHz would have made it sound harsh. The model was just generating a template of what a good audio engineer would say about an unscripted podcast-style recording. It was predicting the text of a recommendation, not analyzing the need for one.
It is a probabilistic storyteller. It knows that in a conversation about audio engineering, people often talk about 2 kHz boosts, so it just throws that in there to look the part.
Precisely. It is a form of sophisticated mimicry, and while that is fine if you are just playing around with an AI assistant, it becomes a massive liability when you move into fields like forensic audio or health diagnostics.
Let's talk about the forensics. That sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. Did they actually try to use it as a lie detector?
They did. They gave it prompts for deception detection. And again, the model was very confident. It would point to certain pauses or stammers as evidence of cognitive load or dishonesty. But as any forensic expert will tell you, those markers are highly subjective and require deep acoustic analysis. Gemini was just looking for the tropes of lying.
So, if I am a naturally nervous person who stammers a lot, Gemini is going to tell the police I am guilty of a heist I did not even have the energy to plan.
That is the risk. There is no physical grounding for its claims. It is not measuring the microtremors in your voice. It is just judging your performance. The same thing happened with the health inference tasks. There is a lot of excitement about using AI to detect early signs of Parkinson's or Alzheimer's through vocal analysis.
Which would be amazing if it worked.
It would be revolutionary, but this experiment showed that Gemini 1.5 Flash Lite is nowhere near that level. It would claim to see signs of vocal jitter or breathiness that were not there, or it would miss them entirely if the speaker was talking about feeling healthy. It relies on superficial patterns to create a convincing narrative. It picks up on the clues you give it and weaves them into a report.
It is a strange image, but the implications are serious. What about the room acoustics? Did it try to tell them the size of the room they were in?
It did. It described the room as being approximately 12 by 15 feet with some soft furnishings. Again, it sounded great, but the recording was actually done in a much larger, treated studio space. The model was likely picking up on the lack of echo and assuming a small, carpeted room because that is the most common training data for high-quality, dry audio.
This really changes how I think about these interactions. When I use a model like Gemini or Claude, and it says, "I can tell you are excited," I always thought it was actually hearing the excitement. But you are saying it is just noticing that I used 3 exclamation points and the word awesome.
In the case of text, yes. In the case of audio, it is noticing the tokens that represent the word awesome and the high-pitched frequency tokens that often accompany excitement, but it does not understand the context of that pitch. It does not know if you are excited or if you just have a naturally high voice. It lacks the ability to normalize the signal against a baseline.
So, what is the fix here? Does Google just need to give it more data? Or is this a fundamental flaw in how large language models are built?
It is a bit of both, but mostly it is an architectural challenge. Right now, we are trying to force everything through the transformer architecture. We are treating audio, images, and text as if they are all the same thing once they are tokenized. But they aren't. Audio is a physical signal that exists in time. Text is a symbolic system.
You are saying we need to stop treating sound like it is just another language.
We need to give these models a frozen digital signal processing layer. Imagine if, before the audio ever reached the large language model, it went through a dedicated piece of software that performed a real spectral analysis. It would measure the actual words per minute, the actual pitch jitter, the actual frequency response. The model would then receive specific data points to interpret.
The large language model gets the data from the specialist and then uses its language skills to explain it to us.
Precisely. That is what we need. It would provide the grounding that is currently missing. Instead of the model guessing your age based on your stories, it would have a measurement of your vocal fold flexibility to work with. That would move us from probabilistic storytelling to objective measurement.
I feel like this is a huge warning for developers who are building apps on top of these Flash models right now. If you are building a fitness app that tells people how hard they are working out based on their breathing in the microphone, you might just be building a very expensive random number generator.
That is a very real danger. We are seeing a lot of AI theater. Because the model speaks so fluently and sounds so confident, we assume the underlying analysis is sound. But as this experiment shows, the confidence is part of the language model's nature, not a reflection of its accuracy. It mimics the correct form without necessarily having the correct substance.
We need to start paying attention to the grounding. One of the takeaways from this study is that we should always look for the source of the model's claims. If you ask a model to analyze audio, ask it to cite specific timestamps and explain what it heard at those moments.
It was hit or miss with timestamps in the study. It could find general areas where a topic changed, but it struggled with millisecond level precision. Again, that goes back to the tokenization. If your tokens represent chunks of time, you can't be more precise than the chunk itself.
This also explains why audio-to-audio models sometimes sound so weirdly emotional in ways that don't fit the context. They are just predicting the most likely emotional tone for the words they are saying, rather than reacting to the actual vibe of the conversation.
It is a performance, but we have to remember that it is a simulation of understanding. This brings us back to that signal versus symbol debate. In the AI world, we have been very focused on symbols for the last few years because that is what large language models are good at. But as we move into the physical world, into audio, into video, into robotics, the signal matters. The physics of the real world cannot be summarized as a series of tokens without losing something essential.
This is critical for agentic AI that needs to interact with the world. If an agent is going to be our eyes and ears, it actually has to be able to see and hear. It can't just be guessing based on a library of tropes.
And that is the next frontier. We are seeing the limits of the current approach. The fact that this experiment was released as an open source benchmark on Hugging Face and GitHub is a great sign. It means the community is starting to hold these big companies accountable. We aren't just taking the marketing department's word for it that the model is natively multimodal.
I love the term eye safety in this context. Usually, when people say AI safety, they mean stopping a superintelligence from turning us into paperclips. But this is a much more immediate kind of safety. It is the safety of not having an A. I give you a false medical diagnosis because it misread your tone of voice.
That is a very practical and urgent form of safety. If we start relying on these models for insurance adjustments, or legal discovery, or medical screening, the lack of acoustic grounding becomes a major liability. We need to demand transparency in how these models process non-textual data.
So, if I am a developer and I want to use Gemini 3.1 Flash Lite for an audio project today, what should I do?
You just have to use it for what it is good at. Use it for content summarization. Use it for high-level sentiment analysis based on the text. Use it to identify accents or dialects because it is actually quite good at that linguistic pattern matching. But if you need to know if a speaker is lying, or if they have a specific health condition, or if the room they are in is too noisy for a good recording, you need to use traditional digital signal processing tools alongside the AI.
It is about matching the tool to the specific requirements of the task.
Precisely. The takeaway here is that we are in a transition period. We have these incredibly fast, incredibly eloquent models, but they are still essentially floating in a void of symbols. The next step is grounding them in the physical signals of the world.
I wonder if that is what the full, non-light models will look like. Maybe the reason the Flash models struggle is because they are so stripped down for speed.
That is a possibility. The light models are optimized for efficiency, which often means more aggressive compression in the tokenization process. A larger model might have a more nuanced representation of the audio. But even then, without a fundamental change in architecture, the semantic bias will likely remain. The model's brain is just too wired for language.
Language is its primary function, and other modalities are secondary layers.
I suspect the future is a hybrid, an end-to-end model that has specific, hard-coded pathways for signal analysis.
A system with specialized components for different inputs.
Precisely. We need a temporal processing layer for the AI. Right now, it is all frontal cortex.
Well, I for one am glad to know that my sloth-like pace of speech is still a challenge for the world's most advanced AI. It makes me feel like I have a natural defense against the machines. If they can't count my words per minute, they can't optimize me.
You are safe for now, Corn. Your low arousal lifestyle is an edge case that Gemini is still trying to figure out.
Good. Let it keep guessing. I will just be over here with my hibiscus, maintaining a valence of 0.8 and an arousal of 0.1.
The study Daniel sent really is a wake-up call for the industry. It is easy to get caught up in the magic of a model that can talk back to you in real time, but we have to keep asking what is happening behind the curtain. Is it hearing you, or is it just predicting what you want to hear?
It is a classic case of sounding good versus being right. And in the world of audio, being right usually involves a lot of math that isn't very catchy in a marketing demo.
We need to value the boring, objective measurements just as much as the flashy, conversational ones.
That seems like a good place to wrap this one up. We have covered the signal versus symbol gap, the dangers of hallucinated expertise, and why you probably shouldn't use a large language model as a lie detector or a height chart.
It was a deep dive, but a necessary one. If you want to see the full dataset and the 49 prompts Daniel was looking at, you can find them on Hugging Face and GitHub. It is a really well-documented piece of research.
And it is a great reminder that as much as these models advance, there is still no substitute for actual physical reality. Even for a sloth, reality is pretty important.
I agree. This has been a really enlightening look at the state of audio AI in early 2026.
Thanks as always to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for keeping the signal clear and the symbols meaningful.
And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power this show and keep our own internal models running smoothly.
This has been my Weird Prompts. If you are enjoying these deep dives into the weird world of AI, do us a favor and leave a review on your podcast app. It really does help other people find the show.
Find us at myweirdprompts.com for the full archive and all the ways to subscribe.
Stay curious, stay grounded, and maybe don't trust the AI when it tells you how tall you are.
Goodbye, everyone.
See ya.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go. Oslo takes two facts on cue. We change and follow through. My weird prompts, that's the close from sloth from man, from long-eared host. My weird prompts, until next time, stay curious, keep